Picture this. It's Saturday morning. Sunlight spills into the kitchen. 53-year-old project manager Dave is lying on his back under the sink, basin wrench in hand, flashlight clenched between his teeth. His wife stands in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee, watching him dismantle a faucet that has never needed dismantling. The faucet works perfectly. It has always worked perfectly. The handle turns, water flows, water stops. No drip, no leak under the sink, no stains in the basin. Yet, Dave mutters, the valve seat feels a little rough. His wife can't tell the difference. Truthfully, neither can he. But he's already 3 bolts deep, and there's no pulling him back now. Parts are laid out in precise removal order. The only sound is the grunt of a man solving a problem that doesn't exist. This is not boredom. It is not restlessness. It is not even perfectionism. Something deeper is driving the wrench beyond plumbing. Psychologists call it an internal locus of control. The belief that outcomes come from your own effort, not luck or outside forces. This belief is structural, wired into the nervous system through small victories. Diagnose, fix, test. Each cycle reinforces it. The brain reinforces it. The brain learns that the world is knowable, fixable, and responsive to attention. A man with a strongly wired internal locus of control does not wait for things to break. He cannot. The anticipation of failure feels more uncomfortable than the labor of prevention. Fixing something that isn't yet broken is not irrational. It is the nervous system maintaining the illusion, or perhaps the reality, that decay can be outpaced by vigilance. But there is an even deeper current beneath it. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi studying a psychological state he called flow. That condition where a person becomes so completely absorbed in a task that the prefrontal cortex, responsible for self-monitoring and anxiety, goes quiet. Flow requires a precise balance. The task must be challenging enough to demand full attention, yet familiar enough to stay within one's competence. Fixing a faucet that already works is not meaningless repetition. It is a perfectly calibrated flow trigger. The man under the sink knows exactly what every component does. He knows the sequence. He knows the torque. The task demands just enough attention to silence everything else. The quarterly review he's dreading. The conversation with his son that went sideways. The blood pressure reading. Under the sink, none of it exists. There is only the fitting, the wrench, the valve seat, and the sequence. The faucet is not the point. The silence is the point. Ronald Levant identified normative male Alexithymia, a culturally trained difficulty in identifying and naming emotional states. A man feels something heavy and shapeless in his chest after a difficult phone call. Instead of sitting with it, he walks to the garage and tightens the table saw fence that was already perfectly aligned. The emotion doesn't disappear. It reroutes through the motor cortex. It becomes the turn of a wrench, the sweep of a plane across a board that was already flat. Researchers describe this as action-oriented emotional regulation. The male brain's tendency to process emotional information through motor planning circuits. The man under the sink is not avoiding his feelings. He is processing them through the only channel his socialization left fully intact. There is one more mechanism worth naming: the Zeigarnik effect, the psychological principle that incomplete tasks linger in active memory with far more tenacity than completed ones. To most people, a working faucet is a completed system. To the man under the sink, every working system is a system that has not yet failed. The failure is not present, but it is pending, and that pending state creates an open loop the brain cannot close. Preemptive repair is the brain's attempt to close the loop before it ever opens. It is not clinical anxiety. It is the deep structural need of a problem-solving mind to stay ahead of entropy. A man who can anticipate failure, disassemble the system, inspect every component, and reassemble it with confidence has closed a loop that would otherwise run silently in the background of his mind. Like a program consuming resources, generating heat, producing nothing visible, yet costing everything. This behavior has a lineage that stretches back through generations of men who communicated through repair. The father who could not say, "I'm proud of you," but rebuilt the bicycle before dawn so it would be ready for Christmas morning. The grandfather who never spoke about the war, but spent every evening in the basement resharpening tools that were already sharp. The garage was the confessional. The work was the prayer. No words were required because the vocabulary was never taught. The sons who watched learned the grammar without learning the language. They inherited the impulse to fix, to tighten, to preempt, to restore, without any framework for understanding what they were actually doing. In Spokane, Washington, there's a 61-year-old cabinet maker named Frank. He has been married to his wife, Carol, for 34 years. Their youngest daughter moved to Portland last September. The house, which had been noisy for 3 decades, suddenly went quiet in a way neither of them was prepared for. Frank did not talk about it. Carol noticed he started fixing things. First, the back gate, which had a slight lean that hadn't bothered anyone for years. Then, the guest bathroom toilet, which Frank declared was running, though Carol could hear nothing. Then, the weather stripping on every exterior door. Then the garage door springs, which he replaced on a Tuesday evening, even though the door opened and closed without complaint. Carol told her sister on the phone that Frank was going through every system in the house as if he were preparing it for inspection. What she didn't say, because she couldn't yet see it, was that Frank was replacing the structure he had lost. For 30 years, the house had demanded things from him: broken hinges, clogged gutters, leaking washers, the constant quiet emergencies of a home full of children. Those demands gave Frank a role, a function, an answer to the question every man eventually faces when the house grows quiet. What am I for? When the daughter left, the house stopped asking. So Frank began inventing requests. Each repair became a conversation with the house, a negotiation that kept the relationship between his hands and the world from falling silent. She brought him a glass of water and stood beside him without speaking. He pointed at the clamp and said, "I think it could be tighter." She nodded. They stood together in the humming quiet of a house that no longer needed fixing and a man who could not stop. Carol did not tell Frank that she understood. She didn't need to. 34 years had taught her that the wrench in his hand and the tightness in his jaw were the same language. And that language was not about plumbing, vents, or clamps. It was about holding something together when the thing that mattered most could not be held. Upstairs, their daughter's empty bedroom door remained closed. But every pipe in the house was tight, every hinge was oiled, every weather seal was fresh. The house was maintained to a standard that bordered on the ceremonial. It was his vigil. It was his only available prayer. Most people see a man disassembling a perfectly good faucet and think, he just can't leave well enough alone. Obsessive, controlling, maybe a little ridiculous. What is actually happening is a nervous system performing maintenance on itself. The internal locus of control needs regular proof that the world still responds to effort. The flow state needs a task calibrated to the edge of competence. The alexithymic brain needs a motor channel for emotional processing. A working faucet provides all three at once. The man is not fixing the faucet. He is fixing something inside himself that he does not have a word for, using the only language he was ever taught. If you have ever found yourself tightening a bolt that was already tight, checking the level on a shelf that has been straight for years, the real question is not what is wrong with the faucet. The real question is this: what would happen if every fixable thing in your life were suddenly permanently fixed? If there were nothing left to tighten, nothing left to adjust, nothing left to disassemble and lay out on a towel in careful order, what would your hands do then? And what would fill the silence they leave behind?